Hello, class. This lecture is basically an extension somewhat of Jewish history from the timeline. It's going over 5 different names, collective terms that refer to the Jewish people, some geography, and then terms, Jewish terms for the divine, for God. But all right, so this will not be nearly as long as our previous lesson again on the timeline. We'll go in chronological order. We'll start with Hebrew. Hebrew is the term that's used for the Jewish people before Israel itself was an actual nation. These are the ancestors to those that live in Israel, the Israelites. Thus would be the term for the people that live in Israel. Their ancestors would be called Hebrews. Thus, the descendants of the Hebrews would be called the Israelites. So that's the term for that is Hebrew, the ancestors to the Israelites. It definitely can be seen as an ethnic term as well too, for the people of Israel, the Jews, to differentiate and separate them from other ethnicities like the Egyptians and the Philistines. We don't really know where the term originates. Unfortunately, some scholars believe it terms from Eber, perhaps one of Abraham's ancestors that you do see identified in the book of Genesis. So Hebrew is the earliest term, a collective anthropological, cultural, sociological term to refer to the Jewish people. That's the first term. A good example of this would be Hebrew would be Abraham. Abraham would be a Hebrew. He wouldn't really be an Israelite because there is no Israel yet. So it's kind of like calling Christopher Columbus a Virginian. Well, there is no Virginia. There's no colony or eventual state of Virginia. So how could Christopher Columbus be a Virginian? So it's kind of like that analogy, if you will. Then we have Israelite. Israelite is a reverential, respectful term reserved for the people of God, the people of the book, the people of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Jewish Bible. This really kind of starts as a term from the time of Moses to the different exiles in Jewish history. So the Hebrew people are delivered and liberated out of Egyptian slavery and returned back to the promised land of Israel. So hence, with Moses the liberator, under his guidance and leadership. So thus, they're going back to Israel. They return to Israel. So now we can use the term Israelite. They're in Egyptian slavery beforehand, before all that, so we would probably use the term Hebrew. That'd be more accurate. And that lasts until, and of course, Israel does come from Jacob's name being changed to Israel, his name change. Jacob was the son of Isaac, Isaac the son of Abraham, so this Jacob is the grandson to the patriarch Abraham himself. And we can use this term until the exiles. The Assyrian exile by the northern kingdom, conquered by Assyria in 722, 721, and then the southern kingdom destroyed and obliterated by the Babylonian Empire in 587, 586. You have that split, and the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah during that kind of that rival kingdom split civil war following the death of King Solomon over what was seen as inhumane treatment, increased taxation, and the construction of the first temple, Solomon's temple. So you have Israelite and Hebrew. Jew is going to be used thereafter, after the exile. So it's post-exilic. It's a term to refer to the Jewish people following the Babylonian captivity and exile, when the Babylonian Empire conquers the southern kingdom of Judah, again in 587, 586. Some of the Jews, a remnant, a portion of the Jews, return back to Jerusalem to reestablish their way of life, following Cyrus the Great conquering the Babylonian Empire and establishing Persian dominance. Cyrus the Great frees the Jewish slaves from their Babylonian enslavement itself, and so now we use the term Jew. It comes from Judah, of course, a Judahite, Judah. It comes from the Greek, Judea. So Judah is obviously a Hebrew term, The Greek equivalent is Judea, and then we get Jew from Judea as an English shorthand. So Hebrew, Judah, Greek, Judea, and then Jew, English. And then, Jew is obviously a popular term still used today, whereas Hebrew and Israelite aren't. A person, a modern day contemporary citizen of the nation of Israel, which is a fully sovereign, independent, and autonomous state. It's a part of the United Nations. It has its own, democratically elected government with a prime minister, a parliament, a judiciary. It has embassies and ambassadors, so on and so forth. So Israel does exist as a country. It was founded on May 14th, 1948. So it's got, over 70 years of history behind it as a modern day state and country. A citizen wouldn't call themselves an Israelite. They would call themselves an Israeli. Again, Israelite is a respectful term for the people of the Bible, for Moses to the exiles. Israeli is your modern day term used for the roughly 11 million Jews, Israeli citizens that live in the modern day state, country, nation of Israel. Galilean, I don't know why I gave you so many notes here, but Galilean is basically just a northern Jew. It's the people of the northern regions of Israel, west of the Sea of Galilee, and that's, of course, in northern Israel. Jesus definitely was a northern Jew himself, for example. Don't worry about all those other points, but I mean, they're definitely accurate for Galileans, but it's you don't need to memorize what kind of tribes are coterminous with the area of Galilee. Don't worry about that. But so those are our 5 terms for the people, for the Jewish people. Here's some geography. We'll do a map later on. I'll do a quick second video, a separate video on that. But here are just 3 terms so far: Palestine, Mesopotamia, and the Fertile Crescent. Palestine basically is a term that's used today. It comes from the Hebrew Peleshet, meaning the land of the Philistines. So is our first point here. The Philistines are one of the historical hated enemies of Israel. So the Hebrew word Peleshet basically refers to the Philistines being one of the most remembered enemies of Israel. The Jews revolt against the Roman Empire several times, and this is the term that basically Rome gives to this region. So as one of the many punishments enacted by the Roman Empire against the Jews, they name this region after one of the historical enemies of the Jews. The language of the Roman Empire was, of course, Latin. So Peleshet, the Hebrew, into Latin eventually becomes Palestina. And then, of course, in English, we get Palestine. So the Roman Empire adopted this name, Palestina, from Peleshet, as one of many punishments. And then the British Empire, when they control this region, they use Palestine as well. Today, Palestine usually refers to Arab Muslims, not Jews. And it would presumably be the name of an independent Arab state for Muslims once one is created. Mesopotamia means literally between the rivers. In this case, the land between the ancient rivers of the Tigris and the Euphrates, in mostly present-day Iraq. This is the site of the great cultures that you learn about in Western civilization, like the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian, Akkadian civilizations in present-day Iraq. So Iraq is basically, the cradle of Western civilization. Very, very important. The Fertile Crescent is something, that you learned back in grade school. But basically, it is a shape of land in the shape of a crescent that has very fertile, rich soil, arable land that obviously that's habitable and that supports life, where civilizations, Mesopotamian civilizations, have thrived in the Middle East for literally thousands of years. Recorded human history and Western civilization begins in the Fertile Crescent. So part of the Fertile Crescent is Mesopotamia that you see here on this map. Here's the Euphrates on the left, and then the Tigris on the right. And then the city of trying to move my mouse around here, sorry. is where Abraham's homeland, and where he's called to leave Ur and go to Canaan on this map, another term, Palestine, the promised land, Israel. He can't travel a straight path, a straight line. Even though a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, he won't survive this desert. He'll die because it's so he has to just not supportable for life. So he has to travel the Fertile Crescent instead, which of course lengthens the time duration for his journey. He traveled this as thousands upon thousands upon thousands have had. So Mesopotamia is part of the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent extends from Ur with the Tigris and the Euphrates, which go into the Persian Gulf. So the Persian Gulf to Ur, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Babylonia, Assyria, empires, and then it arches up here close to what we call Turkey and Jordan and parts of Syria and Lebanon, and then it goes down the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, here we have Israel with Jerusalem, and then the Sinai Peninsula here into Egypt, into North Africa with the Nile River, and of course the Red Sea. So that's your Fertile Crescent. And then 3 terms for the divine. And there are many more, but I thought 3 was enough. I'm sure you don't disagree. Jews have many terms for God, for the divine. You have Adonai, which means Lord, the Lord. And this is a term that was used by one of the authors, don't worry about Elohist, of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Christians sometimes call it the Pentateuch. Elohim is the gods. El or Elohim is the gods or the God. So every time your name ends in El, like Michael and Samuel and Rachel and so on and so forth, you're referencing God in your name because it probably has Hebrew origin. That's God. You can, of course, say Adonai Elohim, which would be Lord God. Why would you have the gods? It's just a majestic plural. So a king or a queen, a ruling monarch never refers to themselves in the singular. They always use the majestic plural because when they speak for their country. They speak for their nation. God speaks for everybody. God has an administrative court, heavenly, kingly court in heaven with angels and other, all this majestic power. So it's not polytheism. It's still monotheism, just in that majestic royal sense. Yahweh is the unspeakable divine name. It's God's proper personal name. It is highly disrespectful for you to say it, for you to enunciate it. Just as it's disrespectful for you to say your parents' first name, whether it's Bob and Mary or whatever. You refer to their titles because they're your parents out of respect and adoration to them. So you say their titles, mom or dad. Same thing with God. Say God's title. Obviously, God's title is God or Lord or others in Judaism. So it's totally disrespectful to say God's name. So rather you say God's title. What happens after time goes by, whether it's 1 week or 4,000 years, you forget. So Yahweh is what we think is the unspeakable divine name, God's actual proper personal first name, if you will. It seems to be related to the basic verb of any language, which would be to be. In Hebrew, the infinitive would be hayya. You conjugate to be in the personal singular in English, and that's I am, right? And that maybe is what is Yahweh. It's the personal singular conjugation of to be hayya in Hebrew, which would be Yahweh. There's more to it probably. This is just a scholarly reconstruction. I am who I am. I am the one. I am the one who will be there. I am the one who will be there for you, and so on and so forth. Those are just estimations. So, all right. So that'll be our discussion of 5 terms that refer to the Jews. Again, you had Hebrews, Israelites, Jew, Israeli, and Galilean. 3 terms for geography with the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, and Palestine. And then 3 terms for the divine with Adonai, Elohim, and Yahweh. I'll do a map here with I think 15 terms for geography that I'll record quickly here as well. Have a good day, everyone.